Hello, party people, and welcome to office hours in the Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. Glacier Bay is, I believe, the largest national park in the United States. I don't know if it is in the world. The narrators from the U.S. Forest Service were talking about how there are only two larger parks. One is in Greenland, and one is Antarctica. So it's pretty interesting. Went through the John Hopkins Glacier, the Great Pacific Glacier, and now we're on our way back out of the park. And I thought, well, I'll just do an office hours and give y'all a little tour behind me. In case you're wondering, is it really cold enough to have a jacket like this? Yes, it is. It is very cold, especially with a little bit of wind going past here on the balcony. So let's go into your questions. Top voted question. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, daggone it. I'm going to have to take the gloves off to make this work. Top voted question is from GBDBA, who says, I have over 200 threads waiting on broker receive wait for. This is when I execute SP who is active. Should I be concerned about these? Well, here's the thing. I teach a whole class. Actually, I teach lots of classes, and never in any of my classes do I tell you to look at who is active and look at the open threads and see what they're waiting on. I don't tell you to do that. That's not how my methodology works. So attend my training classes and you'll learn how to focus your efforts instead of shining flashlights in random dark corners of the server going, is this okay? Is this okay over here? Are these spiders? Are these bad? No, stop doing that. That's not how we tune servers. Next up, not close enough to retirement to stop learning. Oh, it's been a while since we've seen you. Says, hi Brent, love your content. Thank you for all that you do. You mentioned that HackerNews is one of your sources for technical news. How do you curate the articles to what interests you? I read them. That's what you have to do with news sites, is you have to read the articles. I know sometimes this comes as a surprise to people. They're like, Brent, how do you know so much? I read the documentation. I read the news. I read what people write about the tools. Reading, as they say, is fundamental. Do the fundamentals. Next up, TheCuriousOne asks, hey Brent, on a client system with access restrictions, what permissions do you absolutely need for being effectively able to do some performance research? Okay, so this is a really good question. As a consultant, what I tell clients is, you're going to need me to give the same. You're going to need to give me the same permissions that you would give a DBA. So, for example, you would need to give me view server state, sysadmin, and anytime you start pulling back restrictions lower than view server state and lower than sysadmin, then I go, you know what? I don't know whether or not I'm going to have the information I need because I don't research that. I just tell clients, give me the keys to the server and let's go from there. Now, I don't think that everybody in the world has that capability. There are going to be those of you out there who have to do performance tuning in environments where you're not allowed to have the keys to the server. I just don't know what to tell you because you're effectively continuously asking people, hey, what's it look like now? Can you look over here and see this for me? That's not the way that I wanted to spend my life. So I just say to clients flat out, I got to have view server state or sysadmin, those two things. Also, I have to have wine. I mean, I don't have to have wine, but helps keep you warm, right? All right, next up we have TJ asks, hi Brent, what are your steps for when a query runs slow in an environment with different specs? If you're trying to test and compare performance between two different environments, the number one thing you need is the actual, not the estimated, the actual execution plan from both environments. You want the actual execution plan because not only will that tell you if the shape is different, and different shaped execution plans are going to perform differently, but the other thing it'll tell you is it'll tell you weight stats from each environment. Maybe one of those environments is waiting on CPU, one of them is waiting on storage. The beauty of what Microsoft, they've done a lot of good stuff recently, but the beauty of what they've done recently with actual execution plans of putting in things like CPU time, putting in whether or not stats were updated, which stats were used. They even tell you what weight stats were happening. That's just utterly fantastic. Next up, Manoj asks, what is your opinion of hierarchy ID data types in SQL Server? Do you see frequent performance issues with it? I never see it. I never see hierarchy ID. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I've just never seen it myself. Efraim asks, what do you think about SQL Server 2022's QAT backup support? Is this a game changer for multi-terabyte database backups? Nope. The game changer for multi-terabyte database backups is SAN snapshot backups. Always has been, always will be. Because that way you can get backups in a matter of seconds, and QAT can't even come close to touching that. I don't have anything against QAT. If people want to use that, that's totally fine. But when you talk about multi-terabyte database backups, there is simply one answer, and that's snapshots. SAN snapshot backups. Parminder asks, do you see more SQL host machine failure rates on the cloud, in the cloud or on premises? What are the top failures you see? Well, for me as a database administrator, I don't really care why the host hardware failed. I couldn't care less. And there's also nothing that I need to do about it. If the host hardware fails, you know what? That's what system administrators are for. Assuming when you say host that we're dealing with virtualization, my VM should simply automatically start up on another host somewhere else. So it's just not my problem. It's not something that I have to deal with. So I don't bother doing root cause analysis. Something that I learned a long time ago is that, this may sound funny to you, but only focus on the things that you can actually fix. If you can't fix them, don't worry about them, because you got enough stuff that you need to fix that you're not fixing. Focus on that part. Sigríður, I believe that's an Icelandic name, Sigríður, says, do you have a recommended way to find the top queries that are using TempDB the most? Okay, so this is kind of tricky because TempDB allocations aren't saved after the query completes. What you have to do is you have to find out the times when TempDB is being hammered and look at what queries are running then and who's using the most TempDB out of those. I teach you how to do that in my Fundamentals of TempDB class. You could also use extended events if you want to set up a session ahead of time too as well. I don't talk about that in the class, but it's totally valid too as well. Next up, DBA Mufasa asks, what is your best advice for running CheckDB on a database that's a large database? He says 1 terabyte, that's part of an availability group. Should I run CheckDB on both the primary and secondary, or run it on one, use the physical only? So for me, when I hit the terabyte and beyond mark, one of the most important things to do is restore the backup somewhere and run CheckDB against it. Microsoft recognized this, and they changed the licensing as of SQL Server 2019. You don't even have to be running SQL Server 2019. All you have to do is be licensed for SQL Server 2019 under software assurance, no matter which version you're running. Like you can be running an older version of SQL Server And then you get a free replica, whether it's log shipped, whether it's restored, whatever. You get a free replica where you can run CheckDB against it. And that way, I know I have a place where my backups are secure and that passed corruption checking as well. So that's my personal favorite there. Now, of course, would I rather run CheckDB on the live servers? Absolutely. But when you hit the 1 terabyte mark, often it's very hard to allocate enough resources to do that. Companies will try to cut corners in terms of hardware. And one of the places they'll cut is saying, well, I'm sorry, we don't have enough horsepower to run CheckDB in production. And that's cool, I understand it. Neil says, can a company have both a production DBA and a development DBA? Absolutely. In fact, some of my clients have teams of each of them. They have teams of production DBAs and teams of dev DBAs. He continues, he says, would they be on the same team or different teams? Typically, when you start to break them up like that, they're on different teams. His last question is, what if there was only one? Who would hire the other one? And this is a better question than it might sound like, because it sounds, to be perfectly honest, it sounds like a really bad question. Sounds like the kind of question that makes me drink wine. It's not true. My throat was just dry and I felt like drinking wine. But it really is a good question. Who hires production DBAs? Typically, they report into systems administration teams. So like a Windows team or a sysadmin team or a DevOps team. Then, oh God, Alex Yates is going to kill me for saying DevOps team, but the reality is this is what it is. Who hires the dev DBAs? Typically, they're best reported into the development teams because they work closely with developers. They don't need to be on call when production issues happen. They're really focused on high performance and fixing performance issues. To do that, they're going to need to understand the application intimately. They're going to have to do lunch and learns with the developers to teach them how to fix these problems for next time. They're going to have to check things into source control. Those are all functions of development teams rather than production DBA type teams. Peter says, who is the Brent Ozar for linked server query tuning? The answer is really simple. Don't do that. Oh, who's the person who helps me make it better if I punch myself in the junk? No one. People don't help you with that because you shouldn't be doing that. No one is going to sit around and help you make linked server queries faster because they suck. It just doesn't make sense. Now, if you absolutely had to do linked server queries, the easiest thing to do is run a stored procedure over on the linked server and then pull back just the results of that stored procedure. But even as I tell you that, you're like, Brent, that's really hard, and I don't want to do that. And that's also why I don't want to teach you. No one wants to teach you. You're out of luck. Next up, I know it's tough, right? My cold heart. Next up, BacH says, hey Brent, my company is thinking about enabling row or page level compression in order to save space. Is there a way to find out how many additional cores are required to offset the compression workload? I'd like to compare the cost of the compression versus the cost of the licenses. So the simple answer here is no. But that's okay. Just think about it for a second. Are you running 80, 90% CPU use? Probably not. If you are running 80 to 90% CPU use, you shouldn't be implementing compression. It's just a bad idea. It uses CPU cycles. But if you're running like 40 to 50% compression, or for 40 to 50% CPU, do you really think the company is going to give you more money for licensing when you turn on compression? They're not. They're going to say, we have the headroom, let's turn it on. And they're right, but there's a catch. You don't turn it on across the whole entire database, across all the databases on the server all at once. What you do is you start with the smallest objects and gradually turn it on larger and larger objects So that way you can see the CPU overhead as you go. And when you hit a point where you're uncomfortable, then it's easier to say to the company, well, look, I turned on compression across our smallest 100 tables, and all of a sudden I've noticed that our CPU on average has jumped up by 10%. I'm not comfortable adding more objects to the compression scheme until we've added more CPU power, and you can go from there. But you know what? You'll never notice it. You won't. Almost nobody ever notices it. Although on the flip side, it often doesn't really save a whole lot either. Next up, Petey asks, why would a linked server's data access property change from true to false? This is happening occasionally for no reason that I've been able to find yet, and it's causing a vendor supply job that relies on it to fail. What can I look for to catch the change in the act? Oh, a linked server property. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is I would crank down permissions. I would see who has permissions to do that, like who's sysadmins across the board. And then I'd start rolling passwords. I would start changing passwords to make sure that people aren't sharing an application password, for example. If you hit the point where something is changing it, is like, I believe the linked server changes. I don't know if it requires sysadmin or not. I would think it does, but I'm not 100% sure. But if you've gotten down to only the people you can trust and it's still changing, that tells you that you can't trust one of those people. But the problem that you're probably going to run into is there's a whole bunch of people with the sysadmin passwords or with sysadmin level access. And in that case, I'm not really worried about linked server permissions. I'm worried about everything. I just use this as evidence that, hey, look, everybody's a sysadmin on this box, and I can't tell you who's making these changes that keep breaking the app. I sure wish I could lock it down to the point where we don't have to worry about it. But as long as you let everyone be a chef in this kitchen, we're kind of screwed. And that doesn't feel like I'm giving you an answer. But the reality of it is, there's not just one thing that's going to change. There are all kinds of things that are going to change. They might be changing other things. I'll tell you a great story. I was working with a client, and we ran into a problem where MaxDOT was changing out of nowhere. Somebody kept changing MaxDOT back and forth, and it turned out that they let a whole bunch of people have the application level login, which happened to be SA, required for their application at the time, required, whatever. And a person was trying to run their reports, and they were changing MaxDOT to be unlimited when they ran their reports because they wanted their report to go faster. As long as somebody can change something, they're going to change anything, and you got to lock that stuff down. TheyBlameMe asks, hey Brent, have you ever managed to combine your love of cars and your love of SQL Server via your consulting work? Yes, by working with companies that did car stuff. And I don't think I'm allowed to talk about any of them, so I don't think I can use names. If you go to BrentOzar.com and you click consulting up at the top, there's a little list of client logos. Those are the ones that I've talked to, and it's okay for me to name them publicly. I don't think there's a car company in there, so I don't think I can talk about that. And we'll do one more. ProochingMan, I don't know why ProochingMan. ProochingMan says, for documenting architecture or data lineage, we try to use Visio, but manually creating that is very time-consuming and prone to human error and not updating. Have you seen any tools being used out there amongst all your customers? So this is one of the things that Microsoft tried to work on with master data services and with Purview, and nobody's picking that stuff up. Nobody's using that. Because you'd have to document everything inside your organization. And I know how y'all feel about documentation. You don't read it. You're sure as hell not writing it. Am I right? I'm right. Let's be honest. I'm right. That's what those tools are supposed to do. I just don't see anybody using them. It's always funny. Should I go there? I should probably go there. So Microsoft has this, it's not my first glass of wine. Microsoft has this program called MVPs, Most Valued Professionals. And what Microsoft will do is they will incentivize the MVPs. Hey, you should talk about Purview. Hey, you should talk about Azure, for tools that they want to get the word out about stuff. And so you'll see blog posts written by people who've never actually used the tool. They're just trying to get other people to use the tool. They're trying to drum up excitement. I kind of half-jokingly say that these days MVP stands for Marketing Valued Professionals. Microsoft's trying to beat these drums to get people to talk about this stuff. Nobody's using this stuff. It's just dead in the water. But I say that in a negative way. Do I wish people used things like Purview? Absolutely. I wish companies classified their data. I wish they understood the source of where it came from. I wish they marked which parts were sensitive and shouldn't be exported. I wish they used tools that linked in with that so that they didn't accidentally export data out to suppliers and include things like customer names and social security numbers and minors' ages and things like that. But the reality in 2023 is people are still playing fast and loose with data, and I don't see that changing. Because in this day and age, it's going to take another drink of wine here. In this day and age, do you see companies hiring like crazy to increase the quality of their data and how that data is managed? No. You see layoffs. You see companies trying to cut costs as much as they possibly can. Microsoft in the headlines recently for saying that in the year 2023, full-time employees are not allowed to get any raises at all. That's effectively cutting your staff's salary because of inflation. Inflation isn't letting up. Inflation is eating away at your base salary. So every Microsoft employee took a pay cut despite them making $18 billion in profit this quarter or whatever it was, $18 billion this year or whatever. Companies aren't investing in data staffing the way that they should be. So I don't see companies fixing that problem. Am I mad about that? No. I mean, I get it. It's not a sexy problem to solve. People would rather make their queries go faster, and that's why I'm in this business and not the Microsoft Purview business, because I want to do things like go to Alaska and see the glaciers and look for polar bears, although in this jacket I kind of am a polar bear. All right, so we'll stop there for today. God knows it's going to take me like 3 days. True story, the last office hours that I did, it took 2 days to upload via the ship's Wi-Fi. I uploaded it on YouTube. It took 2 straight days for it to upload. So we'll see. This may take a little while before it goes up. But thanks for hanging out with me. I am now going to retreat into my cabin, watch this view from the inside, and drink the rest of my bottle of wine. So thanks for hanging out with me today. Hope y'all had fun. I'll give you a moment to enjoy the view there. And I will see y'all in the next office hours. Oh, I forgot to say adios. Adios.